Yesterday we worked on testing. What are some things people learned about testing? Everyone close your eyes. This is anonymous. Close your eyes. Even if you're Anthony. Putting your head down doesn't mean your eyes are closed. It just means I can't see your eyes. Close your eyes and raise your hand if you like testing. If you like testing. If you like testing. Too soon to say. Okay, raise your hand if it's too soon to say. Raise your hand if you outright hated it, Phoenix. I knew before you even raised your hand. What are some things you learned about testing?
I don't like it.
You don't like it? Okay, we get it. You're starting from like this very, very foundational level. I appreciate that. Let's move beyond that. What are some other things?
It can be difficult to think of things to test for because you're really breaking it down to what do I want this to do only at this level.
It can be difficult to think about things to test for because you're breaking it down to, say the rest, sorry.
Like, what do I want it to do only on this level? Like, I'm not thinking about big picture what I want this to do.
Yeah.
What are the individual things that I want it to do? And how do I test that it's actually doing that? It can be tedious and also just hard. Do I want to make sure a string is a string? Like, maybe make sure a string is a string.
Thank you, buddy.
That's a little abstract.
So, I've got the JSON in it. It's an array. And then there's also, I don't know, count. Two. Just with this object, how many tests would you probably make? Morning. Sam, how many tests could you make with this object here? What tests would you make?
To see if the data loaded and to make sure the count is correct.
Let's do one more test you make.
If there is an array.
Think that this thing exists. So yeah, it's probably a pain in the butt to start.
And that's what I think is hard right there. Because you can't have a count with an array. It's redundant, but also it's like, so yeah, you break it down to that level where the only way I have a count is if there's an array. So if there's no count, if there isn't a count, like, how do you, that's what I would do as well. Like, but
Yeah.
it's just a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think what you're intuiting there is that count is probably the count of things in here, but you didn't create the API. So you still want to validate those things independently. Michelle.
How do you independently validate that this exists separate from did this load correctly? Did it load it correctly? Did it already exist?
Yeah. So those are separate tests. Did this load is the very first test, right? It's like, did I get a thing? So yeah, more accurately, test might be, is there something there? Then, each time you ask a question, each time you say, is something there, or did I get the right value, that is its own test. And so the validation between something existing and it existing in the way you want is your test suite itself.
I'm still confused with me.
Keep going.
Where, how is there a thing different from does this exist?
Think of them as the same. Sorry, this list?
I mean, you have 3 bullet points there, right?
Yes.
So how is the first bullet point different from the third bullet point?
This is the thing. So this is an object which inside of it has a list, right? The very first test I'm doing is making sure I'm just getting an object. That object could be of any form, but I need to know that I got something in the and I think I brought this up to a couple people in office hours, maybe otherwise. When you're decoding JSON, there are only two scenarios that you really need to think about. Is my outermost object one object? Or on the highest level, is my outermost object an array or multiple objects? So all you're doing is you're looking at the syntax at the outermost level to figure out how you're decoding it. That's a good starting point, is do I have one thing in a blob? Or do I actually have a bunch of things, a bunch of blobs? And once you get from the outermost level in, then you do the same thing at the next level. Maybe there's an array inside. Maybe inside the array there are objects. Maybe inside those objects are arrays. The pattern is always just, well, first of all, is there something at all? So more than 0. And then, is it that there's one or there's many? Keep that in mind when you're looking at JSON. Is there one thing or are there many? Hi, Albert. What are some questions you have about that? Because that's super important. That's just like, this is like a maze that you're looking at when you look at JSON. You're saying, okay, I made it inside one wall. In the next wall, do I see square brackets? Do I see curly brackets? All right, I made it inside that wall. Square brackets or curly brackets? So on. That's how you look at JSON. Yeah.
How do you know what the count is originally?
How do I know what the count is originally?
Is count equal to 2? How do you know 2?
That's from you looking at the call. And you're,
If there's like hundreds of things, you're going to have to count like there's 953 things returning, right? That's good. Assume that you just counted like all that data spot on like that.
No.
It seems like a non-efficient way to do it.
it is an efficient thing if it's important to the call that its count is a specific number. So not every call is going to have a defined number of things, but if you're using an API right, it should, to be honest. Like we talked about a little bit about something called pagination yesterday. If you're making API calls, you generally would like to know I'm getting 10 things back so that when I load 10 things, I should get another 10 and make another API call.
You had 98 things and you ran your pagination, 90 times, and then the last time it will return 8. What happens if that fails? Return like dummy for the last 2, or?
No, it would return 8 things. That's a good question. It would return 8 things. I wouldn't necessarily test. It wouldn't be a broken call if you have a bucket where there are only 98 things. Or let's just go with, let's say 18 for now. If you got a bucket where there are 18 things, and that's where you're going to get things from, and in your first call you get 10, and then your next call, so you say, give me 10. And your next call, you say, give me the next 10. You get 8 back. The call didn't fail. It just means there were only 8 to begin with. So the test might be for something a little different. The test might account for the fact that it got this object in a certain way. The reason you might have a list that also has an int value that's a count is that this count is verifying to you that the list you've gotten is intentionally 2 items, even if you asked for 10. So you might do a test checking that list.count is equal to the actual value in count. Okay. I'm sorry. This guy? Yes. So when you see a JSON, let's get a JSON up. Postman. Oh. Let's find a call. Open weather. So in any JSON, start at the outermost level, and then you move in to start figuring things out. It's not just a dictionary. It's not just keys and values. It can be keys that have nested objects or nested arrays. So the first step to figuring out what you're decoding is saying, is there one thing, one blob? So if it's a JSON object, if the very first character you see is an open curly brace, that means you've got one object generally. You might see some funky looking JSON that try to put multiple in one, and you will deal with that at some point. But as a rule of thumb, literally just look at the very first character you see in the JSON. If it's a curly brace, then you've got one big blob you're looking at. And that probably closes with a closing curly brace. Then, if I keep looking within my JSON, okay, I've got key and value, I've got key and value, I've got key and value, and then I've got key and nested array. So inside of this one JSON blob, I've got this key list, which has an array of nested objects. So each time you are looking at, each time you're looking at your JSON and you see a key that doesn't just list a value, but instead has some nested objects, you have to do the same thing we did at the beginning. Just ask, is this object one or many? And really just look at, is this an opening square brace or an opening square bracket or an opening curly bracket? Say, is there one or are there many? And then as you're reading down your JSON, all right, we've got an opening square bracket. So this is going to be a list, multiple objects, right? It's going to be an array. I see the opening bracket here. So here I've got one thing. This opening bracket, the nice thing about Postman is it makes it pretty for us. It shows us where the closing bracket is. You just follow this line right here, straight down to line 42. So everything inside of line 42 up from line 6 is one object. If I look in this object, I see it's got key and value, key and value. It's got an object inside of it called coord. So I'd probably have to make another object that I decode there. It's got an object inside of it called main that I'd have to make an object for. It's got this key dt and some number value. It's got wind, which is a nested object. It's got sys, which is a nested object. Rain, snow, clouds is another nested object. And then inside of this first item in this list, so one object contains in it a list which has many objects. The first object is this one we've been looking at. Inside of that first object is another list called weather. So here is a nested array inside of that single object, inside of that list, inside of that outermost single JSON object. So just every time you are looking at the opening, like punctuation of an object, think about one or many. It's warm. Sorry. All right. Let's review a few things and learn a couple new words. Albert, what is an API? Application programming interface. What does that mean? How have you used an API? Can you tell me about that? Can you say that louder, sorry? To get information online, cool. So it's something you've looked at and asked for data. Obviously, has anyone used APIs in any other way? Okay. Application programming interface. API. Can anyone tell me what API stands for? What does API stand for? Very good. Phoenix, what does JSON stand for?
JavaScript object.
Notation.
JavaScript object notation. Can you tell me about something on my computer screen that is of JavaScript object notation? Tell me more about the word that.
Just was on
So what is that JSON of? If you had to like summarize the data I got there from an API. You've used that JSON, I promise. What kind of information is in that JSON? If you're explaining, like, I got some data from an API to my grandmother, what would you tell her was in that JSON? About what? Cool. So you hit an API and you got some JSON back about weather. Eric. Forgot my question. What in Swift is a JSON most similar to? What? An array of dictionaries? Pick one of those. Cool. Why is it like a dictionary?
items inside stored as a dictionary.
And what's that like? What's that format that a dictionary has? Awesome. Keys and values. So JSON is most similar to a dictionary. You see a JSON, think of it that way. It gets a little more complicated than a dictionary because of that whole one and many thing. Whereas normally the dictionaries were used to have a key of one type and a value of another type, uniformly. That's why we have to decode JSON by creating our own decoder of a certain type. We have to outline, when you see a JSON that we got from maybe this file, or like we're going to learn today, from this endpoint, when you see that JSON, here's the format you should expect. When you see a key message, you should expect a string as the value. When you see a key COD, you should expect a string again. When you see a key count, expect an int. You have to diagram that out. You have to create your own custom structs for that. And you might have nested objects, like in list. Does anyone remember, if I have a struct that I'm decoding a JSON into, let's say it's this struct person. If I didn't want the property in my struct to have to match the key in the JSON exactly, what type of enum could I use? Alex. I can use an enum called coding keys, which is a string and also implements coding key. What do I do with that? What do I do with that enum?
All the cases that match whatever is in your
Match all the things. What would you call all of those things?
properties.
Next. So you create, you say, hang on one second. You say what each property will be coded from. So you say what string your decoder should look at in a JSON in order to turn it into the properties in your struct, in could be the same. So you might say the case is message and not say a different string. You might say for this property in person called, I don't know, what's a good one? Count. You might want to call it CNT. So you would say the case is that CNT, so the property in my struct, and then you give it the raw value of the string it should find in its JSON. Ayla. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. The question was, what was the question?
Which was, he asked me how to, what would I do to change the name and it's pretty much what you just said.
It is. I guess the question was on the highest level, or the scenario was, I know that I'm going to decode this JSON into a struct of mine. And if something is conforming to what type alias have we been using, Kevin? There's a type alias that all of our decoded JSONs have, that all of our structs that decode JSON have conformed to. Remember that type alias? No, Jack, I see your mouth. Codable. Codable. So when something is codable, why? Keep going, Kevin. Why do we make something codable? What's the purpose of that type alias, those two protocols? Yeah, and what are those things doing for our object? You can use the words in your definition. Cool. So when you're decoding, tell me A or B, are you changing your object into JSON or changing JSON into your object? Cool. So decoding is turning some JSON into your object. Encoding probably the opposite. So when we are decoding and encoding, we might set up these coding keys so that typically in a codable object, any property that you have, so any struct with some property called count would have to, the string, the literal string that you type into your struct's definition has to match the key in this JSON. So by default, that's how decoding is going to work. Alex found this coding keys thing, which says, actually, I know the JSON calls count. It has this key count, that is the string COUNT, but I actually want to be storing my property in my